Good evening and welcome to Education World's Facebook Live discussion, Right to Education Lost in the Hijab Row. Let me begin by introducing my distinguished panelists. We have Maya Menon with us. Maya is the founder director of the Teacher Foundation, established 2002, a highly respected Bangalore-based teacher development organization. Welcome, Maya. Our next panelist is Professor Rajeev Kadambi. Rajeev is an alumnus of Nalsar, Hyderabad, Boston and Brown Universities, USA. Professor Kadambi teaches political philosophy and ethics at the O.P. Jindal Global University Schools of International Affairs. Welcome, Professor Kadambi. Our next panelist is Professor Amman Madan. Professor Madan teaches at the School of Education at Azim Premji University, Bangalore. And Amman was also guest faculty earlier at TIS Mumbai and JNU Delhi. Welcome, Professor Madan. And our next panelist is Nooraine Fazal. Nooraine is co-founder of the Inventure Academy, Bengaluru, ranked among India's top 10 schools in the education world, India school rankings. Welcome, Nooraine. We also have Professor Geeta Bhatt with us, who will be joining us very shortly. So welcome all panelists. And before we begin our discussion, I just want to set a brief context for the debate this evening. People have been across the country. I think Karnataka's schools and colleges have been thrust into an unwarranted controversy over the past 3 weeks over the permissibility of Muslim girl children wearing the hijab or headscarf. What started with the protest of 6 Muslim girl students of the government girls PU College in Udupi district has quickly spread to other education institutions in the district, even across the state actually. Even as Hindu students in some colleges are registering their counter protest by wearing saffron shawls. So schools were shut temporarily. Allegations and counter allegations are being made by the BJP, SDPI, and the entire debate has become politicized, communalized, even as the Karnataka High Court is seized of the matters and currently hearing a petition filed by the girl students. But in our discussion today, we are asking the question, is the right to education being lost in the din of politics of the hijab row? So, schools and colleges have reopened after almost 2 years of closure because of the pandemic, the world's longest education lockdown. We've, I think, surpassed even Uganda. And India is in the face of a grave education emergency. 260 million children have suffered huge learning loss in addition to mental stress, and millions have dropped out of school. But right now, the debate in Karnataka is over the hijab controversy, whether Muslim girls should be allowed to wear the hijab or not. So I'm going to have a quick rapid fire round with all my panelists. I'm going to ask you all for your preliminary comments. I want you all to answer this question as briefly as you all can. Is the right to education lost in the hijab row? I start with you, Professor Madan, if you could take that question up.
I think the answer is fairly clear that what should be a very basic thing, that the most basic thing right now is that students have suffered so much due to the pandemic and so much learning has been lost. Students have forgotten the basics of their own subjects. Instead of paying attention to that, instead of thinking about how do we catch up with this lost learning, and which is a problem across the board. Leave aside a very few schools, very few families who had the resources for online learning. But students across the board have forgotten things. Now, instead of paying attention to that, we are, what are we getting lost in? And this is actually a part of the problems which can come up with the politics of identity. That the politics of identity can be very good, very constructive, but the temptation is always to take up superficial things which are symbolic, rather than paying attention to real issues. And this is what we are seeing. This is really unfortunate. The real issues, students have lost the basics of their life as a student, and instead of that, this is what we are arguing about.
Yeah. I mean, in India, we are quite expert at making bad situations worse. So, Maya, your preliminary comment.
I agree with Aman when he says it's a case of skewed priorities, and of course it's been a violation of child rights, children's right to education. It has been also a manufactured crisis, and the pawns here are schools, children, teachers. They become political pawns, and I think so. It's a deep sense of sadness and distress, the fact that we still seem to have such skewed sense of priorities. And I think that's all I have to say at this point of time.
Okay, great. We'll come back to all of y'all again. Nooraine, quickly over to you.
Hi, thank you so much. I think the shortest possible answer is yes, the right to education has been compromised and has been lost. Even prior to the pandemic, India had the largest number of children in the world, both at school and outside of school, who are not learning. The pandemic, as Professor Madan said, has just made it a whole lot worse. After 2 years of no schooling, we suddenly find ourselves in a situation where the government has ordered high schools and colleges shut. Prior to this, they'd actually banned online education, if you recall. Budget allocation for education has fallen. I think it's around about 3.4% of GDP as opposed to the recommendation of 6%, which has been around forever. According to my math, it needs to be 10 times that, but leave fantasy aside for a moment. And really the visuals that we're seeing, as you can see, I'm not wearing a burqa or a hijab. I never have done. My grandparents, my mother, all of them are very devout Muslims. They follow the 5 pillars of Islam, but we've never once worn a hijab or a burqa. So I'm not propagating that people should be wearing it, but I think people should have the right to choose what they wear or what they don't wear. And seeing the kind of visuals that we are, where children and teachers are being stopped at the gate of the education institutions and being asked to take these garments off is beyond shocking. It's devastating, and it's basically attacking the very idea of India. So thank you so much for hosting this panel and bringing this group.
Thank you, Nooraine. Thank you for that, those words. Professor Rajeev, if I could come over to you and ask for your introductory remarks, please.
Yeah, thank you, Summiya, and to others on this panel. I'll just I'll affirm the points being made by the other 2 panelists, and I'll also state a caveat in the end. The point here in support is clearly the spirit of the Right to Education Act has been violated. The act is unequivocal that every child deserves, and the onus here is on the government to provide free and compulsory education for all students. This is for children between 6 and 14. Leave aside the technicality about this being a junior college, because I think this is now spread to schools. There is an elaborate mention in the Act, especially Section 17, which talks about prohibition of all forms of discrimination. And it clearly says zero tolerance for discrimination. That's what the Act says. So the entire spirit of the Act, which is sort of follows the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, is very clear that this is a piece of legislation, a social welfare legislation meant to provide inclusive education for all. And then there is the National Education Policy, which I'll just touch upon in just a few more seconds, which talks about inclusive education, expressly talking about educating students in ethical learning, experiential learning, culture, heritage. It's all over that. It's screaming. The document is all about this. Now, that being the case, clearly a violation of these standards and norms. However, I'd like to say one thing, slightly provocative, but and that is, this is precisely what the opponents of the hijab want, is to anesthetize the issue and make it an only education issue. You see, there is also, speaking here as an academic, and I'm seeing the social tension emerge, this is precisely what the opponents of the hijab want, is to take out, to eviscerate the cultural moorings of individuals, and then make this into some sort of, so the entire claim for uniform is precisely this, right? You strip somebody of their cultural heritage, and then you say, well, we all should be the same. So precisely there is a danger also in making it only an education issue. I think then we enter that. This is just a point I thought I'd just flag for now.
Thanks, Professor Kadambi. We'll come back to the point you made about, thrusting, uniformity into a cultural milieu where perhaps, our education institutions have always been very diverse places. We'll come back and raise that point later on. But Professor Madan, I'd like to, come back to you and ask you, this question of the education emergency which India is currently facing with 2 years of lockdown, where children have not been to school, especially in government schools and colleges, where the debate right now of the permissibility of the hijab is centered around government schools and colleges. Here, most children have never seen the insides of a classroom for 2 years, and now we have this debate. Where children are being stopped from entering, Muslim girl children are being stopped from entering educational institutions. I mean, have we lost the plot? What is our objective? Is it our objective to get children back into school and learning, or we are more worried about their dress?
Yeah, no, that's I mean, it's good to ask what is the intention of this.
Professor Madan, if I could just briefly interrupt you and welcome Dr. Bhatt, who's just joined us.
Yes.
Professor Bhatt, good evening. Can you hear me, Professor Bhatt?
Yes, I can hear you.
Welcome, good evening.
My apologies. Delhi traffic, it has in the last 2 days, it has really become very unpredictable. My apologies for being late.
No problem. Let me introduce Professor Geeta Bhatt to our audience. Professor Geeta Bhatt is professor at the University of Delhi. She's also director of the Non-Collegiate Women's Education Board at the University of Delhi, where she tells me more than 32,000 young women are studying. So welcome, Professor Bhatt. We've just had some initial comments to this question which we are posing, and I'd like your initial comments on that so we can get the debate rolling. Do you believe the right to education is getting lost in the hijab row? If you could give me your initial comments.
Well, yes, I do feel that when we have been talking about right to education to all those who are in school, and as per the Right to Education Act of Government of India, we feel that it has been observed that this particular controversy, which has in the last 1 month, which has erupted and has caught everyone's attention, not even nationally but internationally also. Somehow the very cause of being in a classroom, the very purpose of being in the classroom, that somehow has taken a backseat in this whole controversy. Now, if we look at the data, we do see that the Muslim girls, their number in the classrooms, whether in higher education or in school education, has been increasing tremendously. In fact, if we see the data of AISHE, that is All India Survey of Higher Education, we see that every year there is an increase in the number of girls from Muslim community in higher education, which definitely amounts to the fact that the number of girls coming to school is increasing. And that is how, because that is from where the students come. Now, the whole had this protest been for the kind of facilities, the civic amenities, because we do know that there are challenges in schools, especially in the rural area. At places there are, civic amenities are not there, or in terms of other type of infrastructure. And in this, especially in this COVID scenario, where online teaching and the digital infrastructure, it has become more or less kind of essential for every school and every college, every university to have. At this point, had there been a protest asking for these kind of amenities in terms of the kind of education which they are getting, I think it would have served a much better purpose. In the from 2018-19 Aisha report, it says that in last 5 years, almost in higher education at least, there is especially of Muslim girls, there has been an increase of more than 38% in higher education. And every year, if you look even the past 3-year data, every year there is at least 1% increase in the number of enrollment in higher education. So there is nothing which shows that that the Muslim girls have not been able to get an access because of certain customs or rituals which at present it seems that they were earlier also, there was no such provision where they were being allowed to go into the classrooms wearing the hijab. So it is unfortunate that this kind of a controversy is taking over the nation, where there are many more important aspects which needs to be looked into.
Okay, so I think we are all in unanimity that yes, the right to education has got lost in this hijab row. We'll come back to the specifics. Nooraine, quickly, I'll give you a point you wanted to raise, and then we'll come back to you, Professor Madan.
Sure. No, I think Professor Bhatt actually raised a very valid point, and which made me think that it's perhaps what we have not looked at is the impact of COVID. School closures, college closures. India has shut schools first, opened them last with every wave that has come. And we have provided little or no, alternative in terms of learning for children. So the question I have is, haven't we left a vacuum, which has perhaps been filled by organizations who have encouraged students to wear a hijab and come into school? So in the absence of any socialization, which you get in schools and colleges, the opportunity to interact with students from different communities across the socioeconomic spectrum, I think the government has actually missed that, hey, it's 2 years now. These children may have evolved in their thinking. They may have reached out to other organizations for a sense of identity, a sense of connect, and perhaps their own thinking has evolved. But at the end of the day, I think the fact remains is that we're denying them their right to learn. I'm not just talking about the right to education as, in terms of Article 21 of the Constitution, which is basically aimed at children from 6 to 14, but I'm just talking about everybody across the board. And here is a community where everybody has acknowledged is lagging behind in every socioeconomic indicator. I'm amazed actually that these children are actually going to co-ed schools and studying and demanding for their right to education. And at the end of the day, they're talking about a hijab. For me, a hijab is just a headscarf. Now, what value you want to subscribe to is entirely your choice. But I run a school and we try to keep the uniform as inclusive as possible, to the extent that it's even gender neutral to a large extent. And we've had children, boys who wanted to wear earrings, they've worn their hair long, and they've said it's for religious purposes, and we've said that's fine. So at the end of the day, a uniform has to, yes, give a sense of identity, a sense of uniformity, but surely India is all about unity and diversity as well. So what are we trying to achieve when we basically overnight telling children who've been maybe brought up in a certain way or conditioned in a certain way to say, hey, choose, either you get an education or you go home and continue wearing your hijab. If I will add one more point, actually, it's maybe a bit more controversial, but if somebody were to say they want to ban the burqa, which completely, in my view, dehumanizes somebody, I would agree with that. Because you can't quite tell someone's identity, their security concerns.
No, but you're contradicting your own words. You said the right to choice.
No, right to choice, yes.
The right to choice of,
but no right is an absolute right. They're relative rights. All these rights we're talking about, whether it's Article 19 or 21 or 25, all the way through, they're all relative rights. And as the Kerala High Court, I think, basically found that if it's in the
all rights under the Indian constitutions are subject to reasonable restrictions.
Yeah,
we know that.
Choose by all means when you're an adult, but not when you're a child.
So, Professor Madan, I want to come back to you. We'll just get in comments from our panelists, and then I'll come back to you, Dr. Bhatt. Professor Madan, to the question I was asking earlier, I mean, have we lost the plot in terms of, a huge education emergency, loss of learning, children in mental distress, and then here after 2 years, girl children are entering back into schools and they're being stopped at the gates. I mean, how does that, pan out in our scheme of things? Do we want children back in school? An estimated 30 million children have dropped out. I'm delighted to see that, in government schools and colleges, these children are returning back to school instead of, having joined the child labor force or being forced into early marriage. This is a cause for celebration, not denial.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you that there is a lot of very confused thinking over here. What should have been the main issue for our country today, so far as education is concerned, is obviously not the hijab. It is the kind of things you're talking about. So where is this confused thinking coming from? Why is this kind of confused thinking happening? And so just to be clear on this, see, this is not about having religion in the school or not. Because if people had been worried, if the misled young friends of mine who have been protesting this, if they had been worried about that, there are so many other things to pick up. So many government schools have pictures of Hindu deities. Saraswati Puja is done all over the country. There are so many examples of that to pick up. So it's not actually, there's a huge amount of confused thinking happening over here, behind which is a particular emotional reaction. And let me name that, and because it's a very emotional reaction, which is causing a lot of problems. And that emotional reaction is an antipathy to Muslims. It's an emotional reaction which is guiding this. Now, this is not a good reaction. It's as a response. It's not and this is, there are many sources of this. It is expanding, but this feeling of repulsion and antipathy towards Muslims, this is not what is good for our country. We are all here. We have to live here. And building these kind of antipathies towards one community or the other, because that is what this is. It's not about not having religion in the classroom, because it's there all over. It's an antipathy. Now, this we must, all of us, I think, need to think about and need to worry that if we are building these kind of emotions, where is this going to go? This is not a good direction for this country. It's just going to keep ignoring. So remember, we have this very nice saying in India, krodh se buddhi bhrasht ho jati hai. It's a North Indian saying. And this is what is happening. The real issue we are forgetting, and in our passions, driven by these cultures of hatred, we are looking at non-issues over here.
Yeah, so Maya is something you relate with what Professor Madan is saying. He seems to link this with growing Islamophobia, that this whole protest has been manufactured where divisions didn't exist. And what do you think the impact of this is going to be on young vulnerable children?
So, Summiya, as I said right in my opening statement, this has been a manufactured crisis, and sadly, it started in a government PU college. And I also want to point out that if you're looking at government institutions, Kendriya Vidyalayas, which is run by the central government, in 2012, they allowed the hijab, the headscarf, for girls if they wish to wear it. Now, that is a government institution, and there's schools across the country. So we have made an unnecessary crisis in one government college, and that's got escalated right across. So it is a manufactured crisis, and children particularly, and I particularly feel very strongly for children under 18, who they become, as I said earlier, political pawns. And not just that, teachers have become, have started policing the children. So they're meeting them at the gates and asking them to remove their hijabs as they come in. Now, surely, if while we are waiting for the court order, etc., surely the whole thing could have been done with a greater sense of empathy, a greater sense of sensitivity to children and their parents and their sensibilities. Surely that could have been done. I also want to point out, I mean, if we love to pontificate in education, and we say that the role of schools and teachers is to teach right from wrong, to teach critical thinking, which is mentioned several times in our education policy of 2020. Do we want to teach respect and regard for our diversity? I think Rajiv alluded to it. pride in our rich heritage and culture. If we can answer, yes, we want to teach all this, if it's unanimously a yes, then surely what we have created in our state, in Karnataka, has been an unnecessarily engineered crisis. It's completely diverted attention from the education emergency, Summiya, that you talked about. It's not just in our state, but across the country. We are in a state of emergency as far as education and learning is concerned.
Thanks, Maya. Professor Kadambi, quickly over to you, and I want to, you to squarely address this question of our education institutions have always been very diverse spaces with a lot of student body diversity. Now, why this sudden thing of the government, that the uniform is very important and no digressions will be allowed to it, and the increasing, politicization of this entire thing with everyone what their political might jumping in with their own comments, and the government saying that don't wear anything which will disturb public harmony and order. What do you make of all this?
I mean, being about 25 years since I've been in school, but we never had issues like this. Yes, one would know someone's probably from a different cultural community sometimes. Often with the names, it would be very clear, but there was never any sense of tension or unease. If there was anything, it was perhaps in some quarters for some students, a disinterest. It's not love, it's not empathy, it's disinterest, which is a sort of Nehruvian secularism, a disinterest, and it sort of worked for India for a very long time. The problem, I think, is I think we spend a lot of time, rightly, I'm not saying it's not right, logisticizing this education system. Teacher-student ratio, a look at that Education Act itself is all about this teacher-student, teachers training, all this bathrooms and this and classroom. Forgetting, and yes, curricula, they talk about curricula like it's some ideology inseminating mechanism, as opposed to going into the kind of what is being learned and is understanding each other's culture something we actively enhance in a very early age in a school. That's something I think is relevant today. It's like we're sort of growing. Indian secularism is sort of becoming like Western secularism. So we now have to have these so-called multicultural educational programs for children, understanding each other, trying to not otherize the other. All these small things. I think now I mean, these used to be done in our own way in some schools in the past when we were growing up, when we draw people from different communities, in our sketches or things like that. It could just be done. It was normal. Or, you would know some key prayers from the other person's community or religion. That was something you actively knew, because at a school prayer, sometimes you would have a day for some other religion prayer also incorporated. But I think now it's increasingly an institutional need, where I think this intercultural learning is something that we are failing in. I'll say that for now. It's more.
Okay. I'm going to come back to you and ask you, the legal argument for all this. But Dr. Bhatt, I want to come back to you and quickly ask you that, do you think that, this crisis was mismanaged by the Karnataka state government, where it was just one college which could, perhaps this matter could have been resolved by one college rather than having it spread across the state? And secondly, I also want to ask you, by this denial of these girl children into government college, are we creating a kind of thing, where these girl children will be pushed into where we don't want them to go, to madrasas and to religious schools, where further indoctrination can be happen, and that would be far more dangerous to this nation, where we want children to go to secular institutions like a government college, where there's a more where they have access to education, to higher education.
Yeah, so Summiya, I do agree that this is definitely not an organic protest. So this is a manufactured controversy. And we do know, like, I don't want to get into that angle, but yes, the fact is that there are political organizations, let us say, who are in a way, trying to instigate somewhere. There are campus organizations which are actually, kind of giving training, and these girls have come out and given these statements that, we are being advised by certain organizations on this, and it also reflects in the arguments and the submissions which have been made in the court. I mean, these 6 girls who have gone to the court, they have in their latest submission, they have requested the court to postpone the hearing on this particular case because they feel there are elections going on in 5 states in the country. And these kind of submissions, in the court, definitely, there are various forces which are working, or are in way influencing them. But the fact remains, what is also one needs to observe, yes, I mean, the state government of Karnataka, how they could have looked into this situation, and rather than, erupting into such a big controversy, because if you look in the neighboring state of Kerala, in the neighboring state of Kerala, there are very strict provisions in the schools where you cannot wear anything which is religious to the schools. And there is one particular case in a school which is in Idapalli, in a government school in Idapalli. There was this boy who came with a skull cap to the school, and he was very, very insistent that he need to wear it. Now, this could further culminate, because there is no end to this. Is like opening a Pandora's box. Once someone says, this is my part of, it is inherent in my religion that I need to wear this. Tomorrow, boys can also say that I want to wear a skull cap. And there were other boys. That time there was the Sabrimala, procession going on, and they said they want to wear that particular black dress, and they will also come to the school because it's 41 days of, that particular period was happening. So the school, they took concern, and they said nobody will be allowed, because as it is, there are strictures from the government that no any kind of a religious identity should not be worn in the school. And then they told all of the students that none of you are going to come into this. Also, very recently, there are student cadet corps in Kerala, students who go and they work with the Kerala police. So they have to wear a particular uniform, which is half sleeves. And there again, there are some Muslim girls who raise this, that they are going to wear full sleeves and they want to put a, hijab and all. The state government has flatly refused, but strangely, there is no protest happening in just the neighboring state over there. I mean, this is an issue which, which can, it's like a Pandora's box. And also, I would like to put forth here is that, if you allow a particular, it is actually this, I would like to add what other panelists have also said, is that this is basically about an individual's right to wear a particular, let's forget it is hijab, any particular way, and an institution's autonomy in terms of deciding how a particular individual who is coming to the institution, how he or she has to conduct himself in that institution. It is not about, we are a free country. We are a democracy, largest democracy, functional democracy, where people can wear anything. I teach in a university. In my university, girls, they come in short skirts. They also come wearing a burqa because there is no dress code. Someone who gets elected and goes to the parliament and wants to wear a hijab can very well wear a hijab, or per se maybe wear a burqa. No one is going to, raise any question, but there is no uniform over there. Now the point is that just based on these arguments that these girls will be, like which you raised, that they will be further pushed back into the kind of madrasa type of education, I want to put forth a couple of points on that. And first point is that, of course, we do know that in Muslim community, education has been picking up now in last couple of years. Earlier, this has been reported in many, but the community also needs to, introspect and look into itself. Because every community, there have been orthodoxy, fundamentalism in every community. But due to the lack of, social reformers, somehow we have seen that, giving empowerment to women in the community has always taken a backseat. Now, if these girls, these girls, when it is being, when we are saying that they want to, they will be they will be pushed back into madrasa type of education, the fact remains that these girls, they are at many times we have seen that these girls, they especially these 6 girls who raised this issue, the concern is, what was their objection? Their objection was that there are male teachers who are teaching us, and that is why we want to wear a hijab. Now, this is really a concern, that the kind of environment they are being brought up, where they do not have the confidence in the teacher, in a guru who's there, teaching them in the class. So, and if you look at the various organizations, who are in a way guiding the community for a long period, if I could name, Darul Uloom Deoband, which of course has a large number of following. If you look at their, it is in the, in the public forum, you can look into their website. When there are questions, when people are asking that should we send them to co-educational schools, my girls are now grown up, and because there is parda is not allowed and all, and the kind of fatwas that are being given over there, it is the guidance that is given is, no, you don't, even if you have to travel a lot of distance, you
Dr. Bhatt, but these are, the general thing that you correctly said, that the reform has to come from within the community, and all these are long-term processes. What we are debating is, should the government get into this and deny children the right to education?
It is not about denying a girl an education. It is about also deciding on the autonomy of an institution. There are many schools which will permit that.
But the government has clearly said that this doesn't apply to private educational institutions, that their own college development committees can make a decision. They can allow the hijab if you want. But government, it's our taxpayers' money. They cannot deny their fundamental right to education.
There are many.
Let's quickly get, I think, a lot of rebuts coming in, and then I'll give you a chance to rebut.
I just want to answer your questions, and you can move forward. Even madrasas, they're given government money. It is the government which is funding the madrasas. It is not just these schools. But there, the kind of a dress code that is decided by the madrasa or the whatever body, that they have that autonomy to decide that.
Okay.
Let's keep that thing also in mind.
So quickly, Rhoda, a lot of rebuts. Who wants to go first? I think I'll give Professor Kadambi, and then Maya and Nooraine will come to you. Professor Kadambi, quickly.
I think Amman also wanted to say something, but yes.
Sure, we'll quickly come.
I'll be very short, brief. There are lots of things, but I wholly disagree with the comments of Dr. Bhatt. I think there's a certain condescending, not just certain, emphatic, it's condescending, as if somebody doesn't have their house in order, and there is this perpetual obsession with liberating the Muslim woman and the Muslim community. It's almost a fascination. It drove the world into a big war not long ago, and after 9/11, the war in Afghanistan. A big plank of it was, let's free these tortured, persecuted women from the Taliban. There is a lot you can say, but I think this whole thing of autonomy doesn't really go very far. But I think there are other panelists who want to jump in. So
okay, Maya, quickly to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to also address, similar to what Rajeev said. I think we have to, we're talking about, I'm specifically talking about schools, and we've got to think about schools and children in terms of whatever happens in their homes, what is the responsibility of schools and the government to offer education devoid of trauma, devoid of violence, devoid of feeling, as if they're being pulled in different directions. Children are now being, having to choose between what the government says as well as what their family says. I don't think we should be confusing children like this. I think schools have to do what they have to do, make sure that they have a safe physically safe, emotionally safe environment for effective learning to happen. And that's been actually stated very clearly in NEP 2020. And I think we should be focusing on that, not about, and I think there are very, very articulate girls who wear the hijab and who are very vociferous. I've seen it myself, both teachers who wear hijab as well as students who wear hijab. And in other countries, I've seen in other countries, Western countries, they are allowed to wear the hijab. And we've suddenly made a big deal. And I just want to state it again, that if most schools, including that government college in question, they had it in their norms that you could wear a hijab, the headscarf. And remember, hijab is not the burqa. And I think we should not miss that point. And because otherwise we start questioning the motives of girls who are trying to protest. I think the girls are just expressing that they are hurt, that they are upset, and they have a right to wear what they want to wear, whatever it may be.
Okay, we'll come back. Nooraine, quickly to you. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I could say a lot, but I will say this. Why now? After 2 years of schools being closed, children are going back to school, going back to college. The government chooses now, the College Development Committee or the principal of this college chooses now to basically stop children who are wearing a certain attire from coming to school, and that to a hijab. A hijab is just a headscarf, and what's the big deal? A student can wear a saffron shawl, they can wear a hijab, they can wear a tawiz, they can wear a sacred thread, they can wear a gungat, they can wear a bindi, they can wear a cross. Surely it's an opportunity for us to learn more about each other's cultures, about each other's religions. As a kid, I celebrated Holi, I celebrated Diwali, I celebrated Christmas. I still do. And my friends in turn came home for Eid. Biryani in my house is a big deal till today. Surely this is an opportunity for us to rise above all this. And, Professor Bhatt talked about organizations which are behind the children. Yes, there were organizations distributing saffron shawls as well. Does that make it right? Politicizing children's education, children's lives, basically dehumanizing them. What about their dignity, for God's sake? And you can't wish away 200 million people from this country. You simply can't. Look what happened. You talked about certain wars. Look what happened to the world when 6 million people were trying to be wished away by a particular country. I don't want to go into a history lesson here, but you cannot wish away Muslims. Does the community need reform? Yes, it does. But is this the way to achieve it? No, it's not. Does the community need to take responsibility for itself? Yes, it does. 100%. And should the government get involved? Let me just add one more thing. There was a survey, I'm forgetting the name of the organization, but they conducted a survey of Muslim women, and they found that women are actually saying, please help us codify personal law, because there are a lot of laws which go against us. But there's a way to do it. You got to create a culture. You got to create an environment. You don't shut doors on children's spaces and say, choose between your religion, choose between your beliefs and what your families taught you and coming to school. What is the purpose of education after all? To enable them to enable students to make these decisions for themselves.
Thanks, Amman. Quickly to you and Dr. Bhatt, then I'll come back to you. Professor Amman, if I can quickly come to you, you had a point to make too?
Yeah. Just some factual things. Firstly, that again, but the background again, I think anger and distaste prevents us from seeing facts. Yes, in Kerala, there are some schools which have said that certain uniforms have to be maintained in a completely Western style, and not no Muslim symbols have to be allowed. But if you look at most schools in Kerala, most schools in Karnataka, they are fine with the hijab. They don't have any issue. Why Karnataka? If you look at schools in Delhi, schools most over North India, they look at the use of 6 symbols in schools. The idea is, all right, you believe in the turban. I may not believe in it, but you believe in it. And if I say, no, you can't wear it, you won't come to my school. So all right, you wear it in the uniform color. That is the way we have been historically accommodating this. And it's a wise strategy. By not doing this, we actually cause more problems over here. So again, anger and distaste, dislike, we must acknowledge these emotions and point out to the problems that they lead to.
Okay, all right. Dr. Bhatt, I'm giving you now the chance to, I think a lot of people have commented on what you said.
Well, yes, I have been criticized that I'm speaking in a condescending manner, and well, Dr. Rajeev has a right to, be bitter in, in trying to condemn what I was saying. He has a right to do that. I have no problem with that. But I do agree that, that when we are talking in terms of that there should not be a problem. There are many schools in north of India which allow hijab. There are many schools in south of India they allow hijab. That is exactly what I'm saying. Why is it this? Why is this whole debate being projected as if it is anti-Muslim, as if these girls are being stopped from wearing a hijab or they are being stopped from getting education? No, or those schools which do have in their the institution, in their dress, if they have notified that that this particular aspect is allowed, the girls can go and wear it. Where is the problem in this? I do agree, here with my co-panelist that that is being allowed. But as far as the point raised by Ms. Fazal that there are many women who have been asking that they need codification of law. There is already a codification of the faith. And based on that, the arguments are placed. Like, for example, Sikhs, they wear a turban. So if we go into the legality of it, the way the codification of the faith has been done, if you look into that aspect, then it will be a totally different story. It is because for the Sikhs, the pagdi is within the codified format. What are the integral part of the faith? So let's not go into it. Because this is nothing about faith. This whole debate, this controversy, neither it is about denying Muslim women or Muslim girls education, because they have a right to go to any school where the way they dress up, if they are not comfortable in one particular school, which has their set of uniforms, then why is it that it is being imposed? Because it will have further ramifications even on the larger community. The larger community, which has over the years have been able to some extent overcome, and where girls are going to school and they are not covering themselves, because even in the larger community this has been a practice in many areas. And this, because you see, once you allow one institution is being imposed that they have to kind of give in to a particular demand from a certain community, the way their children want to dress up. Tomorrow it may, in the larger community also, people might say, we want our girls to come with a ghungat and all to the school.
But what's wrong with that?
Larger ramifications. Let me complete, ma'am, then you can give me a rebuttal. That is not a sentence. So this will have a ramification, because then you cannot stop this. Then every community, there are Digambar Jains who don't wear anything, and somebody suddenly decides that, we want to follow our faith to the extreme. Then because once a precedent is set, because this is now sub judice, this is already in the court. These precedents, it will be quoted again and again, and there is no end to it. So let the institutions, give the autonomy to the institutions to decide which is as per the Karnataka Education Act. And they are deciding, those institutions which are giving this, freedom of, there may be schools which allow students to dress up the way they want to dress up and come. So there the students can go and, study. Kendriya Vidyalayas, I believe, are allowing. So these girls who have certain issues regarding it, or their parents, if they have an issue regarding it, they can allow.
The question is, this is a government institution. What do you have to say about, because this is a government institution, so the autonomy can't rest. It has to be, because it's a government institution.
The Kerala Education Act, it will need to be amended, because that gives an autonomy to the school, that they can decide, the particular school governing body can decide that, how they want, what kind of a uniform they want. I went to school in the 20th century, and in my school, you were not allowed to wear a bindi. I went to a Kendriya Vidyalaya, by the way, and you were not allowed to wear a bindi. You were not even a chudi or whatever, like all these rings and all, nothing. Even your earrings were not allowed. And there were some South Indian girls, I still remember, because they had their, gold earrings and all. They had to actually take it out. The school was, where I went, it was so strict, they did not allow. So now, if you want to raise these issues, these issues, you are basically trying to put your wearing a wheel over in front of education. There are many such examples within the community. Muslim Education Society in Kerala, it is one of the biggest society, more than 100 institutions running in India, not only in India but abroad. In 2019, they have put a mark that women won't be allowed, and their president says that it has nothing to do with Islam, and we are progressive people and we want women empowerment. So within the community also there are many voices.
Yeah.
Can I just, I just want to...
sure. We'll just quickly come to
just
Maya.
quickly, yeah. Should I, am I?
Yes, Maya, quickly.
So I think it's time for all of us as educators and people working in education to question this whole role of uniform. Yes, uniform has a certain equalizing function, but I think this whole militaristic approach to uniform is seen particularly in India. We think uniform has to be the way our army or navy or air force wears their uniform with every button in place and so on. I think we have to recognize that uniform is just to ensure a greater sense of equity and equality within the classroom. So we should not be focusing, foisting uniform of a certain kind in our school. Other countries do not do it, and I think it's time for us to expand our understanding of what a school uniform needs to do. I think that is one thing. Secondly, the whole idea of if Jains can wear this, they come in nude and so on. The thing is that I think since we're talking about a hijab and a headscarf, we have to look at the norms of whether is it affecting or hurting anybody's sensibilities? Is it transcending any norms of decency? And finally, by banning it, are you being kind to the other person? I think we have to start evaluating and assessing our reactions and responses to this hijab crisis from that point of view. Is it affecting decency? Is it hurting anybody's sensibilities? And of course, are you being kind to the other person?
Professor Kadambi, I want to quickly ask you, we want to get a kind of a legal perspective from you. All these are fundamental rights. I mean, fundamental right to education is a fundamental right. Now, Article 19, freedom of speech and expression, Article 25, freedom to religion. I mean, where do all these fit in the debate we are having? Is there like a legal argument? Do these rights supersede one another? Can they? What is the legal perspective? If you can just tell us, please.
It's pretty clear. I mean, Article 14, 15, 19, 1A, freedom of speech and expression, Article 25. The reasonable restrictions that apply in 19 and then in 25 are for public order, law and public order. So basically what has happened is suddenly a garb has become an issue of public order. It's first time I've heard of this happening in this post-war Germany where the swastika became something of that kind. But now what's happened is that you have made the hijab into something that disrupts law and order. And clearly, I think, I think that argument might not hold in court, I would imagine. As far as that's the law, you see, but there are other aspects here also. We keep doing this, and I think this came up in Dr. Bhatt's comments also, that you want to see codification. This again, this tendency to go and search into a religion as if it's a constitution, and then see whether that is there, this is there. These are practices. Clearly, let me tell you, wearing a shawl is not a common practice. This is a reaction. It shows that the opposers to the hijab are they're born of a reaction. They have a certain envy to somebody and some religion, and they're like, oh well, how we want to be like them, but we just aren't. So I think the reaction, it's a reaction. And as far as showing it is a practice. It is a practice, and I don't think anyone can dispute it that this is widespread and this is historical. It satisfies every criterion that a court, both legally and for me, ethically and morally, that this is something which is integral to their way and mode of living. Now, if I'm a vegetarian and you tell me for 2 weeks, don't eat vegetarian food, I don't think I'd be able to survive, frankly.
Okay. Professor Amman, did you want to make a point? And then I'm going
just a very small point, which is I want to point out that the format of panels like these, unfortunately, don't permit us to move anywhere. That we are merely stating our positions in an emphatic way, but we're not able to have a dialogue with each other. So maybe at some point, if you could organize a conversation, that would actually help a lot. Then we would move somewhere. Right now, we're just being emphatic and not really moving anywhere.
I wholeheartedly endorse that.
We'll try and arrange a conversation. But I just have, I think we've had a very interesting discussion with diverse viewpoints. But I just have, one question to pose to all the panelists. Do you all believe that whether it's hijab wearing women, it's like we just said that conventionally in India, education institutions have been very diverse spaces, and even in Karnataka, I mean, I went to school and college here, and I did see a lot of women with their heads covered, and nobody said anything, and they were accommodative. It was inclusive. Do you think that, given that yes, Dr. Bhatt correctly said that Muslim women in higher education, their percentage is rising, but let me tell you that in higher secondary enrollment, it's only between 12 to 14% Muslim women. It's only 12 to 14% who cover higher secondary schooling. Should we deny women because they're wearing their hijab their right to education, or should our strategy be empower them with education so they can make their own personal choices? Is that the right way to go? Can I have your brief comments on this?
I'll just have a quick go then. I think our schools and colleges have to be built on the foundations of freedom and choice. You can't help young minds grow and evolve as human beings unless we provide them freedom and choice. Freedom to think, freedom to experience new experiences, and provide them an array of choices and respecting choices. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Dr. Bhatt?
Yeah, so see, I think that I personally feel that no one is denying girls who are wearing a hijab education in this country. They are not being denied because they are wearing hijab, right? So again, I would like to reiterate that it is basically about the collective right of an institution to decide the dress code versus an individual's right to dress in a particular way. Now, it is being politicized by hijab and all other stuff. Now, second point that I want to make in this is that these whenever we are talking about in terms of education and in classrooms, other panelists have also put forth this point that uniforms, they have their own purpose which they serve. Now, in any classroom, this is my personal view, that in a classroom, when it is not just because it has to be a religion neutral space, but also students, they come from different social and economic strata. So that also balances in terms of, because if you just stop allowing them, there are going to be many other kind of challenges. There will be peer pressures based on somebody coming from a very stable economic background and those who may not be so good. That itself is going to create a lot of disparity and challenges within the class. And the uniform serves basically that purpose. And when we say that we want our classrooms to be inclusive, these in schools, I mean in colleges, people can wear, because they're already 18 plus, they wear what they like, cover themselves from top to bottom, or the way they want to dress up. But in schools, these students, when you start dressing up in a particular way, there is these students, when you are all same, there are, without any kind of a, mindset that you try to look at your friend who's sitting next to you in the classroom. You all are there taking education from the same teacher, you are dressed similarly, you're able to assimilate much better. So the idea is basically that all communities should become part of the mainstream of this country and not remain, secluded. So if you for any community, if you start dressing up in a particular way in a classroom, then it may already create a kind of a mindset within the class students, which the whole idea of being inclusive, I think, gets lost over there. So, and let the institutions decide if somebody wants to give all freedom, that they want to dress up whatever way they want to, come in ripped jeans and things like that. It is up to the institution. So let's give the autonomy to the institution to decide, and those who don't agree to it, they have the freedom to go to any other school. So no one is denying girls wearing hijab the right to educate themselves in this country. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Nooraine, over to you quickly. Your closing comments.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you. I think it's time that we stop this, denying children their right to education, irrespective of caste, color, religion, creed, beliefs. Our focus needs to be to get every child back in school and learning. We need to establish what the learning gaps are. We need to establish the impact on mental health that the pandemic has had on children. India was already lagging behind even pre-pandemic. I don't need to get into the ASA reports and the Azim Premji University reports, which are basically showing huge gaps. We need to focus on creating opportunities, because I think a population where you have large amount of unemployment, unemployability, we have a huge disaster on our hands. And I think politicians across parties are basically playing with fire. So I think the focus needs to be to protect every person's dignity. Yes, the right to choose as well. And I'm all for collective over individual, but the collective needs to be based on basic universal principles. And I think we could look at even just the constitution of our country, which talks about justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. That would be a good place to start when we look at creating rules for institutions based on universal values. So thank you.
Thanks, Nooraine. Professor Kadambi, your closing comments?
I think both perspectives, the perspective which is opposing the hijab on certain grounds, as well as the perspectives which are somewhat wishy-washy on the side, but try and say it's the choice of the girl, in this case, the girls in this case, to wear. Both are conceptually, they meet. You see, both have a certain skepticism to the expression of religion in a certain way. They both are limited. Both perspectives are very limited. One wants a certain kind of uniformity, a certain kind of, you could say, kind of total apathy, and the other is fearful, denial, defensive. Both perspectives for me are not very satisfying. I think the Gandhian method, in ways where it can be made in part of everyday interaction between schools, and this is, I come back to the point of the necessity of an intercultural dialogue among children at a very young age. Perhaps this is some way in understanding and entering the other's world through one's own perspectives. What a standpoint.
Professor Madan, your closing comments, please.
Yeah, no, I think it is indeed true that certain young people, misguided by certain other processes, have been actually trying to stop women students from going to school. And the principal, that's what the newspaper said, the principal stood at the gate and said, the MLA has called me, who's of a particular party, the MLA has called me and told me, don't allow them in. This is what is being said by the newspapers. I have not verified it. So to some extent, an obstruction is there. We cannot say that there is no obstruction of girls going to school. Is it a wise thing? I don't think it is a wise thing. And I speak from a person who does not agree with the hijab. I don't agree with the hijab. Even the hijab, in my opinion, is not a wise thing. But this way of dealing with it is not wise, and it causes, it actually further pushes people into the kind of problems we want to get them out of. This is what I will say. So it's not clear thinking, and it's clouded by angers, hates, distastes, which we should acknowledge and step away from them.
Okay, thank you to all my wonderful panelists. I think we had a great discussion, very diverse viewpoints. To conclude, what I'd like to say is that the focus of the country, of our political class, educators, parents, students, has to be only on education, education, education. India has just emerged after the world's longest education lockdown. We've had over 700 days where schools and colleges and universities have been closed. We're facing an education emergency. Let's not deny any child, irrespective of their religion, caste, creed, their right to education, and especially not stop them at the gates of colleges. And especially to the political class, my message is that do not divide and polarize communities within our education institutions. These young, vulnerable children are going to grow up and become the citizens of tomorrow. Let's not divide and polarize them. We need to instead unite them and give them the opportunities and skills to be able to compete in a world which is rapidly leaving India behind. Without developing our human capital, we cannot develop financial or any kind of capital. So let's get our priorities right, which has to be education, education, education. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for
inviting me on your panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure,
Bye.
Professor Kadambi, Nooraine, Maya, and Professor Madan. It's been a pleasure to have you all with us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
Yeah.
Stay safe, all of you.
Take care, everybody. Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.